Okay, I try to okay, the big. Okay, thank you again. For me, it's a really pleasure to participate at this roundtable, and I hope you will apologize for my no good, bad pronunciation. If anything is not clear, please don't hesitate to let me know. So, this morning, as Marta said, I'm going to illustrate you a project called Would You Like to Build Your School Museum? Created in 2011 by the municipality of Turin, Heritage Education Sector, and me. The project consists in a training course aimed at supporting schools that wish to rediscover their own heritage, study it, and enhance it through the construction of a school museum. A school museum in its 19th century meaning, as a tool for support teaching. As you know, in fact, the school museum was born in the mid-19th century as a didactic tool that helps students to learn not only through memory, but also by observing and touching the object. It is closely linked to the introduction of objective teaching and the affirmation of lesson on things. So, in line with the original identity of the school museum, the project Would You Like to Build Your School Museum wanted to accompany the school itself in reconstructing that set of objects, referring to various disciplines which could support active teaching in which pupils come into direct contact with the object, thus favoring learning by discovery and collaboration. The key of the school museum project in our idea were, first point, direct involvement of students and teachers in the creation of the museum. Museum created inside the school building. School museum conceived as a laboratory, alive and active, in continuous movement according to educational needs. And so not a fixed space, not just a collection of objects. And for museum designed to support all disciplines, not just history. Why this idea? This idea was born because the city of Turin had just finished an European project dedicated to the theme School is Our Heritage. And so, for 2 years, he has been working on school heritage and has seen the great potential for activities on this theme. Therefore, at the end of the European project, we asked ourselves how to continue it, and two fundamental aspects emerged. First aspect, the desire to help schools to rediscover their heritage, which risk dispersion. We wanted to safeguard these objects and their value, not always economic value, but certainly as a source, as a trace of the past life of the specific school and expression of its identity. Their dispersion would have been an inestimable loss. And the second aspect, the decision to focus specifically on the theme of the school museum. Because once this heritage has been rediscovered, it has to be used. To be useful to the school, used didactically. Thus, the school museum, in its 19th century meaning, comes perfectly to the world. In it, once again, an instrument of learning. There's two characteristics that I have listed. The safeguarding of the school heritage and its use in teaching seem to me to be exactly what your project Identity and Innovation project is all about. And now we are going to see some aspects of our project, Do You Want to Build Your School Museum? The working method developed in the touring experience included 1. A set of training sessions for teachers on the subject of school heritage. 2. A commitment by teachers to involve their classes in discovering the heritage within the school. 3. A support in the specific planning of activities for the realization of the museum to be divided into different tasks for each class. 4. Expert support in itinerary for the study and the interpretation of the historical teaching materials found. And 5. A series of meetings to coordinate and help the schools. Alongside the face-to-face support, there was also a virtual support aimed at giving teachers a space to document and share their work and progress. This was, in a summary, the project Do You Want to Build Your School Museum, which led to the creation of numerous museums. There are currently 12 museums that have come together in a network since 2015. But in 2019, however, the opportunity for now funding lets us to expand the project and experiment new activities as going right into the classroom, working directly with the pupils. Of course, the transition from a training aimed to adults to one for pupils required the methodological and didactic focus on the course. In order to do this, it was necessary to create from the beginning the feeling of being a group and working for a common purpose. This is how the community of Patrimonieri was born. Each pupil involved in the project to create the school museum was given the title of Patrimoniere, which means the person who studies and knows the secret of the heritage of his school, which others don't yet know. Because patrimonio means heritage in Italian, and so patrimonieri. Who is patrimoniere? As you can see in the slide, the patrimoniere embodies specific characteristics that are shared with the pupils. He is curious to know and discover the history of his school. He has eyes like radars that detect clues and traces of the past. If he sees an old object, he knows he has found a treasure. He doesn't stop at the first impression, but digs for new meanings. He finds ways to share his finding with others. Of course, the role-playing game or the technique of identification is not a novelty in the didactic educational panorama, but it turned out to be very powerful and functional to the target. In particular, thanks to the fact that it dealt with a new, curious, and previously unknown figure, the patrimoniere. How does the patrimoniere work? On which materials? Let's see together. How does the patrimoniere work with historical didactic objects? The approach to the historical educational object in a school starts with a classic treasure hunt. The young patrimoniere altogether, start a search in places which are generally close to them, such as warehouses, basements, and roofs. The element of curiosity in having access to the secret places already creates an active participation of the pupils. The class group then proceeds through these rules, and each pupil can request the attention of the group when some particular object attracts his mind. At that point, the object is brought to everyone's attention, observed, and through a process of uniting the data observed by the group, formulating hypotheses, checking, and so on, the group establish if the object is actually part of the school's historical heritage or not. If it is, the object becomes part of a first list that the class creates during the treasure hunt and is photographed by the pupil with the aim of remembering in the future not only its shape, type, and various characteristics, but also the context in which it was found. Once this first step is completed, the identified historical educational objects are moved and collected in a place for group work. Sometimes it's the same classroom identified as the future seat of the school museum. This operation, which also requires the help of teachers and operators, already allows a first global visualization of the set of historical didactic objects found. It represents an important step for the entire school community that becomes aware of its historical heritage, of which it often didn't know the existence. The second activity at this point consists of cooperative work, in which each group of pupils is given an object from this heritage, when the state of preservation allows it, of course. The focus of this activity is on a careful observation of the object. This is guided through the heritage radar, which is nothing more than a form indicating the element to be observed and noted. In particular, the phase of understanding the meaning of the object is supported by two types of aids: copies of historical catalogs of ancient teaching aids, and the use of the web technologies to identify videos or information that help understand the use of the educational object or elements that can help in dating. At the end of the activity, each group shares the result of their work with the rest of the class and present their object. This is an opportunity not only for further verification of the information, but also for the first identification of correlation between different objects. We are still in an embryonic phase of interpretation, but it is useful to establish the Patrimonier's working method. How the Patrimoniere works with the school building. Pupils are used to go to school every day, but they usually don't really pay attention to the building. For this reason, it is not an intrinsic process to understand that the building is also part of the heritage. In order to make Patrimoniere discover this aspect, he is given a copy of the original architectural drawing. Based on this source, the Patrimoniere has to walk inside the school with a fresh look, looking for differences between the present building and the originally designed one. There can be structural differences of use. And the invitation is also to identify the signs of change. Perhaps openings being moved or windows being removed and so on. Each difference is marked on the copy of the original project and problematized. Why? What was this space before? What needs did it meet? What signs of change in school life or even more in society do these differences show? This exercise, of course, also make the pupils to reflect on the years the school was built. The patrimoniere is also invited to observe symbolic elements that are not part of the original architectural project, but are expression of the school history after its construction. For example, plates as the one in slide which has been added during the fascist period. The activity of discovering one's own school building as an element of heritage also involves exploring the area around the school, walking around its perimeter. The simple action carried out with the mindset of a patrimoniere allows to discover new elements each time, which relate to the interior and exterior of the school life and with the community. The observation of the outside of the building using the radar eyes of the patrimoniere allows us to discover new elements. Sometimes the exact date of construction of the building or that it hosted, as in the case of the Ranieri School, as you can see in the slide, of a circulating municipal library. How does the patrimoniere work? With photographs and documents. Not every school has its own historical photograph or a proper historical archive or found from the historical school library. When they do exist, these elements also become part of the process of creating a school museum, which in our opinion has to involve the knowledge of the different types of materials that constitute the historical educational heritage. If in the school building there is a school archive or a historical library, they are visited and analyzed with the class group in order to understand their meanings, organization, and contents divided into macro themes. Then some documents are selected and studied. Each group is provided with patrimoniaries form, which invite to extrapolate elements from the sources found at school and to interpret them. The group is brought into direct contact with the document and guided to interrogate it. This is another characteristic of the patrimoniere. He knows how to make the documents talk. As in the work with objects, also in this phase of study, every group shares its information with the class and all together they write a report. If the school doesn't have its own archive, in order to bring the patrimoniere into contact with the original school document, we use the materials preserved in the historical archive of the city of Turin. In this way, it's possible to provide pupils with copies of Master's report or inspection visits from the early years of their school. They often contain references to the material life of their school in the past, the furniture, the existing teaching aids, and so on. These references to the materiality of the school in the past allows the pupil to imagine almost visually the school in the past. This is a very useful step for the conscious creation of the future school museum, as it helps the pupil to understand that it is not just a collection of old objects found in the school, but that it is a mirror of the entire life of the school, in which each object is the synthesis of a really big range of messages, meanings, and correlations. How does the Patrimoniere work with intangible aspects of heritage? So, the work of the Patrimoniere on the intangible aspects of the heritage generally arrives in the second half of the course, when the pupils have already collected enough information about school history and have adopted a proper working method. In contrast to the other phases of work, in this case, the pupil is not immediately put in contact with the concept of learning, but is led into a preparatory activity. By intangible aspects, we examine, for example, school habits, getting in line, the ringing of the bell, the break, school parties, songs, memories. Regarding memories, the most used source is an interview with all students and all teachers. The preparation work makes the Patrimoniere not simply to act as a pupil listening, but as an expert questioning a source. It is almost a relationship between equals. The ex-pupil possesses the lived experience and his subjective memories, while today's student Patrimoniere has objective knowledge of the context, reconstructed through certain sources. The Patrimoniere, in some way, during the interview, leads, redirects, asks for feedbacks. Since of the main feature of the Patrimoniere is to be committed to sharing and valuing information, the group analyzes the different testimonies collected, evaluates and compares them, and reflects on the best method to share them. In relation to the final aim of the Patrimoniere work of setting up the school museum, the question is how to make these testimonies available in the school museum. Audio, video clip, transcripts, etc. How the Patrimoniere creates the school museum. In order to create the school museum, the Patrimoniere is involved to do some deep thinking. The aim is to bring together all the school objects found and all the information collected and analyzing them in a comprehensive way. Once he has a complete picture of the elements collected during the whole project, he has to decide which of them communicated, what the focal point is. In fact, the school museum will have a dual nature: to support the school community by offering interdisciplinary educational opportunities, and to open up to the general public in order to show the history of the school. The pupils discuss whether, on the basis of the elements that emerge during the project, to bring out all the elements or to highlight only particular aspects, whether to choose a chronological criterion or whether to emphasize only specific material aspects to particular significance. Consequently, the group selects which materials and information are suitable for the aim and how to present them. This is a complex phase, where the young patrimonieri need a solid guide able to help them in the overall synthesis and to direct them in the negotiation and reflection. Historical furnishing present in the school are generally used for the museum setup, supplemented by some new purchases on specific supports or communication materials. When the age and autonomy of the class allows it, the patrimoniere is called upon to work in groups to design the exhibition plan of the museum. The characteristic of the patrimoniere is not to keep for himself the patrimony of information he has discovered, but to share it and therefore to be a good communicator. The aim is to be a good cultural mediator, and therefore to be able to transmit the set of meanings and relations that the patrimonieri themselves have discovered during the project. Being the protagonist of the discovery, starting from a no-knowledge about the subject, allows them to identify with the cognitive needs of the museum's visitors. Through group brainstorming, we create a list of the macro information necessary to allow the visitor to understand both the general project and the themes addressed. The patrimoniere shares this information through panels with text and images that introduce the visitor to the discovery of the museum. In addition to this, the patrimonieri naturally create explanatory cards for each material on display. Finally, from the day of the inauguration, the patrimonieri become museum guides and present their museum to the public. So, here you can see some example of the result. This is a Gabelli school. This is a Santoro di Santa Rosa school, yeah. Cena school and 25 Aprile school. The methodological approach in that of knowledge building community, selected for its characteristics of co-construction of knowledge. The students were not spectators without knowledge on the subject, but part of a team, as in a research community that worked together, compare, formulate hypotheses, and verifies them until arriving together a knowledge. So, this is a synthesis of the patrimonier's path, but it is necessary to underline that it's not a rigid and prepackaged structure, but it must adapt to the specific characteristics and needs of the individual school, of its pupils, of the preserved historical heritage. At the same time, it is quite clear that it should be considered as a non-exhaustive and partial path. The creation with the pupils of the first nucleus of the school museum doesn't exhaust all the knowledge of the history of that school, all the discovery of the whole heritage and meanings. What does this work leave at its end? A learned working method through sources by discovery, observation, induction, and co-construction of knowledge. New information about the school's heritage and history, and a new museum space as a laboratory and interdisciplinary room available to the whole school. In conclusion, If we continue to use the school museum for teaching over the years, to continue to discover heritage objects and to interrogate them in order to understand their meanings, then we have seen from our experience that it becomes a really working method that characterizes the didactic of the school, where the school museum is not seen as a mere collection, but a stable environment for experimentation, learning, multidisciplinarity, and laboratory work. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.